Hello and welcome, Exiles, to a look into a Righteous Fire, Searing Bond, and Scorching Ray Hierophant. You know how normally if you play a Righteous Fire build, you usually supplement your damage with something like Fire Trap, or maybe you do just normal Scorching Ray. Well, I wanted to try out doing a Hierophant and then combining it with the Searing Bond totem, which creates a fire dot in between you and other totems, as well as Scorching Ray of Immolation totems, which apparently each new instance of Scorching Ray from your different totems adds a new fresh stack of Scorching Ray of Immolation, which actually makes it a decent skill in of itself, and I might end up trying to make a build that just specializes around this skill. But the idea is similar to, like, RF with Fire Trap, or, look at a Cold Dot build that uses Vortex, Creeping Frost, and, let's say, Cold Snap. Use multiple dot skills that can all add a different dot to the damage you're dealing to stack up as much damage as you can, because dot builds, it's hard to get some damage. If you can squeeze in some extra skills that can all deal damage at the same time, it works out pretty decently. So I'm going to go ahead and showcase you guys. I have a Constrictor map here, and we'll do, well, I guess I already witnessed it, so we can't witness Constrictor again, but we ended up doing 4 Void Stones. This is a hardcore league. We've died 0 times. It's group found, so a couple of the gear pieces are, I think maybe 4 or 5 of the gear pieces I'm currently wearing are from pieces that other people found. For example, these rings, this amulet, and this weapon, I think were from people that found other pieces throughout the league. And then, for example, we crafted this helmet, we crafted these gloves. Rainbow Stride, I think somebody else found. Dawnbreaker we got from Exarch when we killed Exarch. And this is a crystal belt we crafted with doing some Reforged Chaos. So it's a mixture of like SSF plus just a small group found. I think about 100 to 200 people played in this group found league. Where basically whatever gear we found that was like good, we would end up hooking up other people with, and so on and so forth. Basically, if you find a good item but you can't use it for your build, you just put it on the trade site for 1 wisdom scroll, and people were just sharing kind of their completions on unique maps and their gear they find that wasn't useful for their specific build. So kind of fun little league that Arrow hosted, and I decided I wanted to be a part of and just try out doing something a little bit different just to see how it went. This character I wouldn't say is necessarily that great in terms of clear speed or anything super powerful, but it's something I enjoyed playing just to try to, I don't know, what's the word, mix it up, try something different. I wanted to try out Scorching Ray and Searing Bond along with Righteous Fire, and this is what we went for. The reasoning behind Hierophant and being able to do Righteous Fire with Hierophant is Hierophant gives you a good ES scaling. For example, you invest into mana and ES, you end up with a decent ES number, so you can see we got to, technically we're about 10k. We have a little bit more than we normally would have because we picked up a massive shrine. It also allows you to go into some totem investment where you get a bunch of totem placement speed, which without the totem placement speed, totems just feel absolutely horrendous. It's kind of hard to play totem builds that aren't Hierophant just because the totem placement speed is so horrendous playing on other classes unless you get a lot of the nodes on the tree. So that helps quite a bit. And then on top of that, it pairs nicely with, what's the word? It gives you a lot of AoE. So, for example, Hyro's Sanctuary Thought is really one of the best nodes in the game, and it gives a bunch of AoE, which helps your RF feel pretty good for clear in terms of most trash mobs die to my RF. And then we got the Scorching Ray and the Searing Bond totems for some single target. Let's go ahead and kill this boss, and then I'll go over the defensive layers of the character. And give you my rundown of how it felt to play and my thoughts on the build overall. When I was doing this run, it was more or less just like, let's see how this goes. And I gotta be honest, doing a pseudo SSF hybrid group found, small little group thing and being able to do all the void zones, I'm pretty happy with it. I don't think it's gonna compete with like the best of the best in terms of SSF build, not even close. But at the same time, it's also been, I mean, we didn't die, so that's the thing. I'm not exactly, man, dude, I'm gonna keep coughing, I'm sorry. I'm not exactly the best hardcore player, I wouldn't think so, and this is what it looks like for single target. It's not insane, but also it's not gonna take us forever to kill Constrictor. Basically a few seconds each phase is what it's looking like. And then if there was, I did a lot of Maven Witness bosses where you have extra, what's the word, dudes spawn in, but we already witnessed Constrictor because I guess I witnessed him previously and forgot about it. But anyways, there's the Constrictor kill. That's what it looks like for mapping and bossing. It's basically just, while you're mapping, you just chuck down a couple totems as you run through the zones. And then when you get to a boss, you have 3 Searing Bonds, which are just to create lasers, which have a fire dot to them. You'll see on our tooltip, we have like a 300k fire dot from our Searing Bond. And then our Scorching Ray of Immolation. It says it's 87k, but that has multiple stacks to it, and you can have multiple instances of it, so that stacks up a lot too. And then we have our Righteous Fire, which has about another 200k fire dot. So I think this character's maybe in the 1 to 2 million range once you factor in like flammability and the extra stacks of immolation, something like that. It's nothing crazy, but it's definitely good enough to do 4 void stones. We did it in hardcore, so I'm relatively happy with this. Now, as for the defensive layers, this character has 88 max fire res, and you'll see my cold res is a little bit bricked, and the reason for that is I just didn't have quite enough gearing to get the res fixed, but I was doing Tempered by War along with this Dawnbreaker, so the idea was I'd focus a lot of the damage all to fire, and then I'd max out that fire res because I need it for sustaining Righteous Fire, so that's a little bit of my elemental mitigation. And then we also have a decent amount of attack and spell block. You'll see 47, 44, along with we do have some decent regen, and we have, what's the word? For Chaos, specifically, we have Ivory Tower. So, a lot of times when I've used Ivory Tower, you'll know I use it with Coruscating Elixir. There's basically 2 ways to build Ivory Tower. This chess piece is super unique in that it can be used kind of multiple different ways. One way is just you stack a bunch of life and you use that life to get a bunch of ES you wouldn't normally get. And that's the way I have used it in most of my builds. If you look at a lot of the Ivory Tower characters I've made, they've pretty much all been that sort of purpose. This is a little bit different. I am primarily using this chess piece for the line that says Chaos damage is taken from mana before life. If you want to play an Archmage character or a mana-based character, this allows you to go low life, as well as get some more reservations than you would have otherwise. For example, I'm running both Flesh and Stone and Tempest Shield, because I have that on my life pool, along with I think I have Vitality as well. Whereas normally on an Archmage character, you get to do 1 Eternal Blessing, because you're not going to reserve anything on your mana, which is what our Purity of Fire is, and then you don't get extra reservation pool. So I really like this chess piece for mana-based characters because it gives you some extra reservations. You get to click low life, which is a damage multiplier, and it ends up working out pretty well for Chaos. From my experience throughout this run, I don't think I ever went to even half mana. We have capped Chaos res, and we have 4k mana. That was relatively enough, and then our mana regen is around, 500. That's pretty decent for mana regen, 560, which is all just pure regen because we don't degen any of our RF damage, doesn't go to our mana pool at all. And that worked fine for Chaos damage. We could have also included a Mastery for 30% Chaos damage, does not bypass Energy Shield. I ended up not doing this because I just never felt like I was in danger to Chaos damage. I did a lot of Chaos bosses. The thing that always felt most dangerous to me in my current situation of my character, it felt like it was Fizz hits for the most part. Fizz hits felt the most dangerous because I don't have a lot of Fizz mitigation. I wasn't able to fit in something like Determination for some extra armor scaling, and we only had about 3k armor, and we didn't have enough passive points to go for the 4 endurance charges, Conviction of Power. I decided Ritual of Awakening for regen and damage multiplier felt a little bit more necessary, as well as Sanctuary of Thought is just an insane node. So once you decide you want both of these nodes, then your pathing becomes pretty much decided for you. If I was going to try to make a build where I wasn't doing the totem scaling, there'd be some scenario where we go Arcane Blessing plus Conviction of Power, but that would be an entirely different build. That would be, maybe it'd be like a Scorching Ray build plus Righteous Fire, some combination like that, which could probably be decent, but that's not what I ended up going for. And we went for a couple of clusters, which just real basic, just a couple of Reforged Chaos until I had some increased effect. And then mainly some jewels throughout my tree where I was trying to get max fire res, just to basically lean into that Tempered by War defense. So that's the idea of the character. This is not particularly high-end gear. This is we did this all on a 5-link, got to the 4 Void Stones and hardcore, and I'm just pretty happy with it. Ultimately, I wouldn't say this character is super powerful, but if you wanted to lean into a Righteous Fire start and you wanted to do a little bit different, say you wanted to lean into Hierophant, I think there is something to be said for the scaling that could be if I had like a 6-link and I really leaned a little bit more into the Scorching Ray of Immolation. Say I had a chess piece that had +2 duration on it. Say I had a level 21 gem, get a 6-link in there, add in some, Awakened gems. The damage for Scorching Ray of Immolation, I think, becomes actually quite decent. Whereas what I had available to me in a small group found, not a lot of trade going on, and limited gearing, I think we did pretty fine just to do Void Stones. I could see this character being scaled up to Ubers eventually, but with the level of grind I did over the gauntlet, I didn't really want to do that grind again here in this SSF League. I just wanted to see if we could get to 4 Void Stone, and I'm pretty happy with that. There's some other projects I'm working on, like, for example, I want to try to make a character with Forbidden Rite of Sacrifice. But yeah, I say all this to say this. I think Templar makes a really good Righteous Fire character. If I was going to League Star RF in the current day and age, I think I'd League Star an Inquisitor, and then I would swap into either a Hierophant or a Guardian. I want to shout out specifically one of the best RF builds I've seen, or I saw this entire league linked to me. Basically, I was joking about how RF doesn't necessarily have an easy time with Ubers, and some guy said I'm AFKing Ubers in hardcore, and I was like, ain't no way. Are you? I thought it was one of those things where people are just making up random stuff, because a lot of times people will say they'll make claims that are completely just false entirely. But let me just showcase you one of the coolest sets of RF gear I've ever seen on a hardcore player, no less. Look at this guy, Chain Fattest, 44,000 ES, Righteous Fire, and he's just kitted to the teeth with a good Lich's Circlet, a Cast Camp Bypass on low life, Twilight Regalia, and a bunch of sick stuff. But this is probably, if I was going to make a high-end RF build, I would either lean into something like the way this guy did it, which is similar to what we did last league with the Man to Man RF build we did, or do a Ivory Tower Gigarf build like we did in Crucible. And seeing builds like this just makes me happy, because I just really like high-end RF, where you just invest into a lot of ES scaling, make the number go big, and he's fully juiced into just RF as a single target damage. No extra skills, just pure RF thickness. And then I guess he has infused channeling for the DR with his Scorching Ray to apply exposure. So this is probably the thing I would say is the ideal sort of RF build in the current late game of what you can do. It's pretty cool that there was somebody doing it in hardcore Settlers and doing AFK and Ubers apparently with this level of regen. It's just a sick build. So I wanted to shout that guy out. And anyways, yeah, we did Searing Bond, Scorching Ray of Immolation. My opinion right now is Searing Bond, and not the greatest. I wasn't really impressed with it. That being said, Scorching Ray of Immolation, I was impressed with, because as far as I've been told and I could tell, it does appear like the totems inflict their own individual Scorching Ray stacks, and they count separately. Like normally when you have, let's say I had multiple sources of the same skill. Like let's say I put down a Vortex and then I put down another Vortex. I wouldn't get 2 Vortex dots on the enemy. Only one of those Vortexes would apply to the enemy. But as far as I can tell, Scorching Ray of Immolation with a totem doesn't obey that rule, because what can happen is I put down one totem, it inflicts a Scorching Ray dot. I put down another totem, it inflicts a different Scorching Ray dot, and both apply. So what you can end up doing is you cast 2, they beam the enemy, and then you cast 2 more, and they beam the enemy. And the cool part about Scorching Ray of Immolation is it has a high base duration. You'll notice on my character, my Scorching Ray of Immolation lasts almost 6 seconds, and that's just from efficacy support and this wheel here. If I invested into some let's say aura scaling with like Malevolence, for example, and I scaled some more duration here and there, we could end up getting that base duration to be a lot longer if I got a little bit more totem placement speed, and I can start ramping multiple stacks of Scorching Ray of Immolation on the enemy, and that does impress me for single target. So I think there's a world where there's a higher RF build out there with a Sync Sling Scorching Ray of Immolation, and ends up being quite respectable in terms of single target. Probably not doing all this stuff with Searing Bond. I think this is just too many sockets. Like, it forced us not to be able to have Immortal Call. I swapped in Immortal Call for my damage link of burning damage for my Scorching Ray setup, just so I could have Immortal Call to proc when I was fighting Uberalder to tank Shaper Slams, for example, to be a little bit safer in that fight. So anyways, that was my take on trying out Totems with Righteous Fire, and I was impressed by Scorching Ray of Immolation. I think there's something there. Searing Bond, Searing Bond, not so much. It didn't seem that great. And yeah, that was my journey into doing a hardcore group found run just on Righteous Fire, Hierophant in Arrow's private league he was hosting. Next build up on the to-do list is I want to make a mid-budget level Forbidden Rite of Sacrifice, probably something around the 50 to 150 divine range, probably closer to the 150 mark. We'll see how much I invest into it, but I'm trying to keep it reasonable so that most people that have played the league up to this point could afford it. Not necessarily anywhere near a mirror or any of that sort of cost level, but stuff that most people that are playing, you know, a couple hours a week could probably reasonably get to if they were just playing over the course of the whole league. So that's the next goal, Forbidden Rite of Sacrifice. We'll see how it goes. I think I have some plans that might work. It might just not be able to sustain its own self-damage. We'll see. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care and peace out. Have a good one. I'll see you guys later. Have a good one.